Hey guys, so the question I want to answer for you today is how much 3D animation was in the original Lion King? And the answer is probably a lot more than you think. To clarify, I'm not talking about the remake of The Lion King. That was obviously all 3D animated. I'm talking about the original Lion King from 1992 that was traditionally animated. But to get the answer to this question, I need to take you back in time. We will start in the 60s. Walt Disney was in the last decade of his life. He had incredible success with his animated feature films, but his passion was expanding for other projects like television, live action films, and his huge creation, Disneyland. Animation was seeing less of his time. Animation was expensive to make. This is due to the time it takes to make animated films. If you're paying artists to be working every day for 4 years to make one film, the cost of production balloons quickly, especially if you're paying hundreds of artists for that film. In the golden and silver age of Disney animation, there were animators who drew each frame of animation. You then had the ink department who would trace over these drawings onto a celluloid sheet. The line would have to be perfect to link from frame to frame so you could not see a flickering line on screen. This was then passed on to the paint department. The painters would paint on the back of the celluloid sheet. Disney would make their own colours and decide on a colour for each character. They needed to make sure the character was a consistent colour from scene to scene.
Disney animation, as most people know, the animators draw in pencil, and then it went to the inking and painting department.
Which meant you took an animator's drawing, put cells over the top of the drawing, clear plastic sheets, and hand traced it with multiple colors. So Aurora in Sleeping Beauty would have this beautiful yellow line around her hair, and she'd have this fleshy line around her face, and her lips would even be a separate ink color.
It was so difficult, and then you would watch these girls, and they couldn't put their hand down on it because they would smear the ink, and they would do these wonderful sweeps and follow the line just so. It was marvelous to watch them work. They were really exquisite at what they did.
And then it would be turned over and painted, and that becomes the cell that you see on screen. It's very laborious, very time-consuming, and expensive.
So, in the 60s, it was decided that this method was too costly. They needed to find a way to make the films cheaper, as otherwise animation would not survive. Enter Herb Iwerks. He was the animator who created the look of the original Mickey Mouse in Steamboat Willie. He was also an inventor. He had an idea of how to keep animation going. It sparked from the invention of a photocopying machine. These would take copies of documents and print out duplicates. He began to wonder if there would be a way to copy the animation directly onto celluloid sheets. This would eliminate the need for the ink department. Xerox was the company behind the famous copying machine, and so they worked with Disney to make this invention possible. It became known as the Xerox machine.
So the Xerox process, pretty simple, operates like your average office copier, except in those days the Xerox machine they used took up 3 rooms. You would have a lens and an electrostatically charged plate, and the lens would take a picture of the drawing and transfer it to that plate. The plate would get dipped in toner, and then the toner would be transferred to a clear cell.
The animators loved the Xerox technique, as for the first time they saw their exact drawings on screen without someone else copying their work and inevitably not interpreting it correctly. The general public had mixed feelings about the Xerox technique. Because the machine copied the exact drawing, it meant the characters now had harsh black lines. To some people, this made the animation look cheaper, as characters no longer had different lines for flesh or clothing, it was all just a black line. This actually worked for the first film they used it on, which was 101 Dalmatians. Milt Kahl, one of Disney's legendary animators, loved that his drawings were now on screen, and he didn't let anyone touch his drawings. He even left the construction lines in the drawings so the audience could see the work behind it. I always know when I'm watching an animation by Milt Kahl, as it's always a scene in which I can see the lines roughed out. He was an incredible animator, and he liked showing how talented he was. It would have been a sad time for the entire ink department, who are now no longer needed for the Disney films.
I think it must have been awful at the time to be an inker at the Disney studios when Xerox happened, because you were out of a job all of a sudden.
And I think it was the best ink and paint department that ever existed on this earth. And I cried when they closed it down.
The Xerox technique lasted for many years, from 101 Dalmatians all the way up to The Little Mermaid. It had advanced in the years by the time Little Mermaid was released, and was now not such a thick black line, but a thin grey line. The Great Mouse Detective and The Little Mermaid were a huge success for Disney. The Little Mermaid in particular broke records at the time to become the highest grossing animated film and started a new era of Disney animation. Peter Snyder was one of the heads of the animation department. He wanted to use some of those profits to help advance the animation into the new era. Peter Snyder and Roy E. Disney managed to get their wish. The heads of Disney agreed to spend a lot of money on a new computer system to ink and paint the drawings.
Jeffrey and Michael started focusing on, if we have more titles, it'll be better financially. And I always fought for, can you take some of those resources and put them back into the business? Which was where CAPS came from, CAPS being the computer animation post-production system.
One of the technology guys, Lem Davis, thought we could use computers to paint the characters in our films and digitally assemble all the artwork.
That gives us not only the opportunity to do some really good art, but it also gives us the opportunity to really begin to explore what these computers and graphics things can do for us in kind of shorter pieces where we can get really a little crazy. And I'm looking forward to all of us getting a little crazy.
With this new system, they could use any colour they wanted to ink the characters. This brought it back to the look from the golden and silver era of films. Long gone was the black line. They could now once again use any colour line they wanted to. The Little Mermaid was the last film to use a paint department for the film. They experimented with caps in one scene of The Little Mermaid to create the rainbow sequence at the end of the film. The next film, The Rescuers Down Under, was the first film to create every scene using caps. This was risky, as the system was largely untested, apart from a few short films. The result was beautiful. The options of what they could do now with the animation had grown.
We're going to see Bernard and Bianca in a whole new way from the original Rescuers. And if you look closely, you'll see she has perfectly blended rouge on her cheeks, blended eyeshadow. These are all character details that we're now able to put into the film. In fact, when you look at the restaurant scene, Miss Bianca, beautifully radiant, is in fact reflecting the candlelight off the table. The diffused snow is falling in the background, and she fits perfectly into her environment.
The image quality for caps was incredibly high considering the time. Each image was rendered at 2K resolution quality, which, think about it, in the 90s was very rare. Alongside this invention was the use of 3D technology in computers. Disney first experimented with this in The Great Mouse Detective. During the Big Ben sequence, all of the gears and the background was rendered in 3D. The 3D background was then printed out frame by frame, so the animators could then draw over each frame to place the character in the scene. For The Beauty and the Beast, they could now mix the 3D technology and caps together to create some breathtaking scenes using 3D technology. The incredible ballroom scene was first rendered using a 3D background. The filmmakers wanted a swooping camera in the scene, so they built this with a 3D camera. Then James Baxter would hand draw over each frame to insert the characters into the scene.
James Baxter, who is one of the most amazing animators, still is, ever on the planet, has this chip in his head where he understands not only how to make Belle and the Beast dance, but also change it in perspective. So as the camera drops from the ceiling down to the level of Belle and the Beast dancing, that was drawn by a human being, a mere mortal, with pencil on a piece of paper to fit into that beautiful computer graphics ballroom.
In the next film, Aladdin, they once again used 3D technology to create the Escape from the Cave of Wonders. This was created in 3D, once again using a 3D camera, and then had Aladdin hand-drawn to appear in the scene. Sequences like this were not possible in the decade before, showing the advance in technology. The magic carpet was also going to be a fully 3D character, but the technology was not quite ready for that, so they animated the character in 2D and then put the 3D design over the top of the character for the end result. So that brings us to the original question: how much 3D animation is in the original Lion King? Similar to Beauty and the Beast, they used 3D technology to have a moving background. Once again, it was James Baxter that animated an amazing 360 scene. The characters have to change perspective in each frame, which shows how much of a genius James Baxter is. Just like Aladdin, they also used sequences that had a 3D background, and the character was added on the top. This happens in the sequence where Simba is chasing after Rafiki after he's been told that he knows his father. This is an amazing sequence that shows how talented the animators are. Ruben Aquino was the supervising animator for Simba, and he did a great job. But now, we are getting to the juicy bit of the video. In fact, this is the whole reason I wanted to make this video. When I was doing my research for 100 facts about The Lion King, I found this out and I was in shock. I had no idea that this scene was animated in this way in the 90s. It blows my mind to see what they experimented with and how seamless it was pulled off. And this is the Stampede sequence. It is one of the most memorable sequences in the film. This sequence creates pure horror for young Simba. For this sequence, a hand-drawn wildebeest was drawn by hand. This was then recreated in 3D animation.
Occasionally there's an effect or something that the directors want in the film that would be virtually impossible to do with traditional animation techniques. Here we've got a hand-drawn model sheet. It's drawn by one of the character designers, and it's basically a model for what our wildebeest should look like. And from this hand-drawn model, we evolved a computer-generated model. This model is a three-dimensional representation of the beast that matches the look of the first model. One of our hand animators, Ruben Aquino, gave us some reference artwork of a hand-drawn wildebeest galloping. And from that, Linda Bell created the three-dimensional motion that you see. It comes close to matching Ruben's animation, except that Linda had to extrapolate and make the motion work in 3 dimensions. Here we get the sense of that motion rotating in 3 dimensions. We can place our camera anywhere. So it's up to our 3D animators to translate that idea in 2 dimensions into something in 3 dimensions, to make it so that that motion or that behavior works from all of the different angles, because we're going to need to look at this thing from all different angles during the course of the scene. This shows us our computer model looking more like traditional animation. We've put inking lines on it. We've got FX drawn hair and a tail that looks like more traditional animation. The painting is very simple. It's a solid color with a tone underneath like the other characters in the film.
I find it amazing that this sequence was done in this way in the 90s. They made this 3D model look as close as they could to 2D animation, and it definitely tricked me. I had no idea that this was not 2D animation.
Here's one wildebeest just running in an environment. The background here was painted by hand, and our animator drew a line indicating where he wanted the wildebeest to run. And now we've got the wildebeest running along that path, and we've also added some character to it. It leans into his curves. Another thing that we've been able to create is the shadow effect underneath the wildebeest. It would have been also very difficult to create 700 shadows underneath 700 independent beasts.
They also had to write a special program for the computer so that all the characters would not collide with each other.
To create the effect of the wildebeest avoiding one another, we had to write special programs for that. The computer has no trouble at all letting wildebeests run through one another. So we thought of each wildebeest as a little magnet, and the magnets sort of push away from one another. But one wildebeest wasn't enough. We needed hundreds of wildebeest. So we had to come up with a way that our animators could control the behavior of hundreds of beasts. So we came up with this idea of a simulation, sort of playing follow the leader. These bugs sort of show us what the simulation is. We've got leaders and followers. And the followers have to follow their leader, but avoid one another, because we don't want the wildebeest to bump into each other. So here we're showing some of the different examples of what we can get when we take wildebeests, run them along, from the top perspective. Then the next step is to match it to the background. We've built a 3-dimensional grid that matches the perspective and the look of a background that's going to be in the scene. On that grid, we placed one of these simulations where each of those bugs now gets replaced with a full running, galloping, hopping wildebeest. And here are some rough scenes showing footage from the film using this technique. Another thing that we did was, for final color, we wanted to give each wildebeest slightly different colors, and we can show that here. You can see for tests, we gave them really random, wild colors. We called them our Peter Max beasts. Here we've got the coloration of each beast being slightly different and random. We did this during the rough phase, so that the directors could say, well, I like the scene, but we need to take the pink guy with the yellow face and move him down slightly, or can we make this guy run a little bit faster, or maybe we should add another beast behind the lavender guy. So by giving each beast a different color, it allowed us to talk about the beasts in the scene. Of course, when we put this to film, in the rough phase, we're putting it to black and white film, so those all just become shades of gray. And then in final color, we do give them each different colorings, but it's within a very limited range of what we want to design the wildebeest to look like. Some of them are slightly darker gray, some of them are slightly lighter gray.
I am in awe watching that footage. I kid you not, the first time I watched that, my jaw physically dropped and stayed dropped throughout the entire video until the end. I had no idea that practically the entire sequence, apart from Simba, was 3D animated. I want to put this into perspective. This film came out in 1992. This came out before Jurassic Park, which would come out the following year. The sequence we just watched predates any of the visual effects that we know today. This was truly a pioneering shot, and it's one that does not get talked about. This is 7 years before The Matrix, and 9 years before Weta Digital's work on The Lord of the Rings. So, what happened next? Disney used the CAP system and 3D technology for many years, and had some incredible moments throughout the years. One standout moment is a scene from Hunchback of Notre Dame, animated by, you guessed it, James friggin' Baxter. Once again animated on a 3D background. Another standout with the advancement of technology was Treasure Planet, that utilised a fully 3D arm for Long John Silver, which looks so good in the film. They also used fully 3D backgrounds to create the flying pirate ship. It makes me wonder what could have happened if they continued making films like this. Animation was creatively doing some of its finest work. The animators were at their best, and the technology was helping them create sequences that had never been done before. Following the box office underperformance of Treasure Planet in 2002 and Home on the Range in 2004, Disney decided to stop making 2D animated films and only produce 3D animated films. They closed down their traditional 2D animation department. The CAPS desks were removed, and the custom automated scanning cameras were dismantled and scrapped. And that was the end of CAPS. And that was the end of that technology. But Disney would return to make 2 more 2D animated films. These were The Princess and the Frog in 2009 and Winnie the Pooh in 2011, and they were both produced using Toon Boom technologies. This offered a more up-to-date digital animation system, and most animators now use Wacom tablets to draw directly into the computer. 2011 was the last traditionally animated Disney film. Maybe we will return to 2D animated films one day, and once again blend 3D and 2D animation to tell incredible stories. Outside of Disney, there still are lots of companies still doing traditional animation. One standout has been Klaus on Netflix Animation, so go check it out if you're a fan of 2D animation. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It started as a look at the stampede scene in Lion King, but it ended up being a look at how technology evolved through the years. This script definitely expanded a lot when I started writing it, but I had so much to talk about. I had so much I wanted to tell you guys, and so this ended up becoming a bigger thing than the initial question, but I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed looking back at Disney through the years. If you guys like animation and learning about facts, then check out my other videos. I'm doing 100 facts about every single Disney film, so come check that out. Hope you liked it, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.